everybody. We are live. I'm the fight analyst, and I am here with none other than UFC the lightweight John Makdessi here on the Dark Side of MMA, the newest MMA podcast out there. We're here to bring to you all things MMA, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But before we get started, I want to give it to our man John Makdessi to give the viewers a little bit about him that may or may not know much about who he is.
Yeah, man. Basically, I've been martial arts since 6 years old. Raised Canadian, Lebanese descendant. Parents from Lebanon, immigrated from the war, and I've been born. I was born in Canada, raised in Canada, and now living in the U.S. and been signed to the UFC for 13 years.
Yeah, man. I mean, I appreciate you coming on, and we're doing this podcast together because I know you wanted to. If you guys didn't see it, we had a very long conversation over on the Clutch Points YouTube channel about like I said, the good, the bad, and the ugly of MMA, the stuff that the fight fans really have not seen, the behind-the-scenes stuff. John gave us a great insight of all the things that we as fight fans and journalists have really don't know too much about, right? And we are here to really talk about those things, but also talk about also the good stuff about MMA, like what's coming up. We recap the fights that just happened, like this past weekend, UFC Vegas 83, and what we're gonna preview what's coming up, which is one of the biggest fight cards of the year, UFC 296 to end 2023. So let's kind of just get right into it. Let's talk about UFC Vegas 83. I kind of want to touch on some brief fights I really want to talk about. I know one of them in particular you know very, very well because you fought both of these fighters, and that's the fight between Nasrat Haqparast and Jamie Mullarkey. We already know what happened. We saw Nasrat absolutely dismantle Mullarkey early in that fight. I wanted to know your thoughts on the performances of Nasrat and the performance of Mullarkey in that fight.
Yeah, I mean that fight was interesting. I was I was really locked into the TV because I fought both of them. I have a bittersweet taste with Nasrat. You look at the fight. I mean, I don't think he beat. You look at the fight in Paris. Judges. It's one of those things where it's like, what are you looking at? Are you looking at the guy moving around, throwing some shots? Going for a takedown. I fought Nasrat and I fought Mullarkey. I wanted Mullarkey to win. Obviously, if you pay attention to my Twitter, I made a tweet. It might be a little bit impulsive, a little bit emotional, but I mean, fuck it. It's the fighting business. I was like, I beat up both of these guys' asses. But the truth is, I wanted Mullarkey to win because I just don't like Nasrat. Like that's the thing. If I see him, if we cross paths, I'm never gonna show respect. Even after a fight in Paris, he's like, let's drop the beef, and I'm like, there is no beef. I just don't like you. I don't give a fuck about you. You're, I don't like his style. I don't like his persona. I just don't like the kid, and he's just very lucky. I told him, you're lucky that you have a good corner. Like, he has no idea that Faraz Zahabi saved his life because knowing he came from TriStar. Faraz was his trainer, and Faraz was my trainer, and Faraz, I always looked up to Faraz. He's like an older brother to me. I have a lot of respect for him. So when I saw him in this corner, it kind of paralyzed me. It was really weird. It's like a lot. The thing is, I wasn't even fighting Nasrat. I felt like I was fighting Faraz. It was really strange. The fight in Paris was strange. I did not pull the trigger. I was slow, but he didn't even do it. Like, he did not do that much damage. I did pretty well considering the fact, him having Faraz in his corner. But Jamie Mullarkey, it was interesting. The thing about Mullarkey, I feel like he shouldn't have taken the fight because the thing is, he comes from Australia. The people don't. So this is the sweet part about fighting. People don't understand, like, it's more than just the fighting part. You have to travel, it's the training camp, it's the recovery, it's the preparation, the diet, the nutrition, and then all those stressors, and then you have to travel. I believe that Mullarkey should have maybe chill a little bit before he accepted a fight, because him and I went 3 rounds. His face was pretty busted. I hit him a lot. I knocked him down. Like, the thing is, people don't realize concussions are just different types of levels of concussion. And being concussed, fighters get concussed all the time in the gym. Just because you're conscious doesn't mean you do not get concussed. Like, just the moment you receive trauma to the brain, the moment you receive trauma to the head, that's why I'm a big fan of. I don't like to go hard sparring every day. That's why I'm a big fan of light sparring, playful. Because the thing is, throughout my years of fighting, I realized, like, I wake up one day and you have headaches. Sometimes you have memory loss. Like, this is the things that people don't realize. Like, we beat the hell out of each other in the gym, day in and day out. We grapple, we punch, strike, shins, kicking, knees. Some guys throw elbows and knees. I usually never throw an elbow or a knee in practice, but some guys are crazy. Some fighters do throw elbows, knees, and sometimes don't even have a protection. Usually you're supposed to have elbow pads, knee pads, but some guys they'll still throw the knees, they'll still throw the elbows. So keep that in consideration. So that being said, I feel like watching Malarkey fight, Jamie fight, he did not seem as sharp as he fought me, because I fought Nasrat, I took his best shots, and Jamie took his shots, and he has a weak chin. Like, he just dropped and he couldn't recover as quick. I just think that he didn't have a good camp going through that fight. That's my own opinion, based on fighting both of these guys.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I mean, I feel the travel definitely played a major part. I mean, but at the same time, we know that Jamie Willardy gets hit. You hit him a ton, and Nasrak absolutely gets he hits like a truck. And if you're just taking a flush shot like like Malarkey did, I had a feeling he was going to go out at some point. But I feel like that was honestly one of Nasrat's best performances that we've seen from him during his time in the UFC. Granted, it wasn't we didn't see much, but he did what he needed to do. Got him out of there in a minute 30. I thought that was highly impressive. I think he's now on a 3 or 4 fight winning streak. If you had to play matchmaker here, who would you who would you give each one of these fighters in their next fight?
I would say I would love a rematch with Nasrat. That's like, not because it's me. It's just to be straight up. Like, I would love a rematch with Nasrat. I had 7 surgeries. I was coming off 7 surgeries, like 2 years within 2 years, back to back. So think about that. That's also a big. That's another thing. I fought this guy was coming off surgeries and coming off anesthesia and rehabilitation and physical therapy, and then jumping into a training camp, which very short period of time. So, I mean, of course, that was me. That's me. In a perfect world, I would love to get a rematch, but obviously, that's different. Realistically speaking, Nasrat, honestly, if it wasn't for his looping, he has a weird way of throwing punches, because he kind of loops in, and it comes in a weird angle where a lot of fighters don't see it coming. The shot, because he has the same looping hand, he has that same looping over right hand. His takedowns, he's a young kid. You know what I mean? He's a young kid, but that'll be interesting. I really don't know. I don't see him beating anybody in the top 15. Just because you have someone a good kicker. If someone has good kicks, Nazra is not much of a big kicker. I don't see him throwing a lot of kicks, but he does mix his punches and he does go for a takedown from time to time. But I don't really, top of my head, I wouldn't really know who would be a good matchup. Maybe Michael Johnson.
Michael Johnson. That actually sounds like a good fight. It'll be a fire fight. Both of them are going to stand really and bang. Nathor's really not going to go for takedowns for the most part unless he really needs to. But in that fight, I think there will be just like an absolute war between those two. But what about Malarkey? What's he going to do here? Where does he go from here after getting, starched as quickly as he did?
Yeah, Malarkey, he's also still young. They're both in their 20s. Malarkey, obviously, take a 1 month. I would, if I was him, just take 1 month off. No contact, like no sparring, no nothing. Just chilling and getting the hunger again. Because that's another thing. Like, you need to be hungry, because the thing is, you have to miss it just a little bit, so you have that fire. You have to lit the fire up, and to go into a training camp and put your body through rigorous uh, training day in and day out. It's a lot of hard work. It's like, you know what I mean. So you have to give his body a little break. An opponent for Jamie, I mean, top of my head, I don't really know. 155 is a stacked,
It
really
is.
stacked. It's a really deep division. I think just not because I fought in it, just because I just think in my heart that 155 is probably the most talented and the toughest division in the UFC. Like 135, 145, 125. There's like a hand of guys. There's like a bunch, like a handful of guys who are good. But 155, there's like a whole. You look up from the 100 fighters, they're all dangerous. You know.
Yep.
But for Jamie Malarkey, I would say, you know, top of my head, I would probably give. It would be interesting to him fighting Jim Miller.
Jim Miller. That'd be a good fight. That would be a good fight. I mean, and then Jim Miller, I think he's actually fighting early 2024, if I'm not mistaken, which sucks because, he fought at UFC 100, 200, and now he wants to fight at UFC 300, but now they gave him a fight like a month or a month and a half before UFC 300. I'm not sure why they didn't put him on UFC 300, but that's neither here nor there. But let's keep it moving. I want to talk about the Anthony Smith knockout. Khalil Roundtree. My goodness. Khalil has looked sensational during his 5-fight win streak. And I wanted to get your thoughts. What on Anthony Smith taking that fight? He's not in fight camp. He's been doing a ton of commentary, a ton of podcasting, but he jumped at the opportunity to co-main event this last fight card, UFC Vegas 83, on just 12 days' notice. Is that something you would have done in his situation, or you would have possibly declined that and taken something else later down the road, possibly in 2024?
That's that. This is the sweet part about it. Like this is the sweet thing about fighting. Sometimes has nothing to do with the actual fight itself. I know it sounds crazy for the viewers, but it's like what was he doing the past 6 to 8 weeks? What was he doing the past 10 weeks? Prior to this fight, was he in the gym? Was he concentrating on other things? Was he distracted? Did he have other obligations? You have to tell yourself what was he doing. That's why when it comes to predicting fights, picking fights, doing all this stuff, for me, I have to study the whole. I have to study the fighter. I got to study where does he live. What's his lifestyle. What is he doing? Because these things play a big role in the fight. You know, and taking a short notice fight. I mean, just like myself. Back in 2016, I took a 2 weeks notice fight versus Donald Cerrone, and at that time he was ranked number 2. He was supposed to fight Khabib. He pulled out. Khabib pulled out, and I got replaced. And that was like probably one of my biggest paydays in the UFC, fighting a guy who's ranked number 2. But I took a 2 weeks. Looking back, would have I not taken the fight? 100%. I would have been. You know what? For sure, I wouldn't probably not taking the fight. But you can't go back in life. You can't dwell in the past. Just because development, it takes a lot of. Donald Cerrone was fighting in the WEC. He has a whole resume of professional kickboxing bouts. He has a whole resume on. He has a lot of experience, many fights. This guy, he's been fighting at the highest caliber for a long time. And then you got someone like me, a little punk, a guy who's just up and comer. Now all of a sudden he's thrown to fucking Donald Cerrone. So mentally, physically, am I at his skill set? Probably not. Mentally, I was definitely not, because mentally I was scared as shit. I was like, what the fuck, I felt pressure to fight him. But the reason why I'm trying to say all that is because it does play a role. Taking a short notice fight, there's no camp, there's no like anticipation mentally, because you have to mentally prepare for something. That's it's not just the body, it's the mind, body, and the spirit. So yeah, so I don't think he gave himself enough time to kind of like get that mindset, because like you said, he was probably doing other stuff. He was probably doing comedy and doing other stuff that I don't really follow him like religiously, but it's psychological. You can always tell by the guy's eyes. You can always tell by the fighter walking into the octagon. Look at his eyes. Is he staring at his opponent? Is he like not sure of himself? Because body language, you can't lie. Your body language there's cues in body language. You can always tell when a fighter is ready and when he's like doubting himself.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I feel like Anthony Smith looked a bit off, but then again, Khalil Roundtree would do that to you. He's a scary he's a scary beast in there, and he's looked the best he ever had. And that fight was honestly his best fight of his career by far. It was, and the way he ended the fight, and he put his fist up there because he didn't really want to throw that last hammer fist, and for the ref to stop to jump in. I think that was like the picture perfect ending for his fight for the biggest win of his career. And then let's touch base on the main event, right? I want to know your thoughts on Song Yadong's performance, his 5 round dominant performance, and the very questionable performance by Chris Gutierrez. I wanted your take on both of them in that fight.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have to understand something. You have to look at who's their trainer, like who's their corner, what gyms are they from, because that plays a big role in the fighter's performance. What's his trainer? Is he a technical fighter? Is this what gym does he come from? You know what I mean? So that's why all these things play a big role in a fighter's performance. You know what I mean? So obviously he's going 5 rounds. He's the main event. There's a lot of pressure. You got to consider all the pressure, the anticipation. People are watching. Has all these eyes, all these guys sending him messages. Probably like the week of your fight, like nobody talks to you, and then the week of your fight, everyone's sending you messages. It's crazy. It's like everybody wants to do an interview with you. Everybody wants to like, oh, you're gonna kill the guy. Everybody expects you to perform a certain way. So obviously, ideally, for every fighter, probably I can only speak for myself, but I think every fighter would want to go out there and knock the guy out in spectacular fashion and get out of here, like the McGregor and Jose Aldo. Like you look at that fight, how all that crazy hype knocked him out in the first round in a couple of
Yeah.
seconds. Think about psychologically, think about that. How fucked up is that? You all those months of going on tour and training and getting ready, and then you go in there and you get knocked out in a couple of seconds. That right there is like trauma forever. That's gonna stay. That's gonna stick by. That's always gonna stay by you. You know what I mean? So, but for this fight, the main event, he won 5 rounds. He obviously played it safe. You can tell he played the point game. He outscored, outworked the guy, and he played. And what I liked a lot was he kept it in his distance, and that's the thing about fighting. It's all about range, getting into your range, and not getting into your opponent's range.
That's true. I mean, you had Song Yudong going back and forth with Piotr Yan on Twitter regarding his performance. Piotr Yan was saying how it was exceptionally boring watching him fight, but being a fighter, like it doesn't really matter if you're really putting on such a very entertaining performance, or do you want to, or does it really matter to you when you're in there? As long as you're going in there, you're doing what needs to be done to get the win. I know. I guess it's different here and there, depending on where they are in the standings, right? Like in that 5 round main event fight, I don't think it really matters whether or not it's exciting because it's a must-win situation for both of these fighters, right? But in your eyes, would you care if someone says, "Oh, your fight's boring," or "It's exciting"? As long as you're getting in there, you're getting the W, especially in such a big manner in the main event of a fight event.
But you have to also understand it's shifting now. Mixed martial arts, it was a combat sport. Now it's becoming combat and entertainment. So
Right.
obviously the entertainment part, the whole like your fight is boring, man. You put him to sleep. That's the facade of he's just trying to get into his head. You know what I mean? He's just
Right.
like, but at the end of the day, I don't give a fuck if it's boring. I'm winning the fight. I received no damage. Ultimately, that's the ultimate goal for a fighter is to hit and not get hit. That's the name of the game. And look at Floyd
Right.
Mayweather. Why was he one of the best fighters? But he also was one of the boringest fighters. But you know what I mean? It's like that defense, the head movement. Don't just stay there and take a shot. You don't wanna just receive shots. You know what I'm trying to say. So
Right.
So that being said, it's all about, you're looking at it in a combative sense, or you're looking at it as an entertainer. As an entertainer, yeah, it's probably boring for sure. It's like, for me, for example, it's like the Khabib, that style of fighting. He mauls his opponent. He strikes with him, closes the distance, takes him to the ground, and he holds on to him. That's, for me, is very boring, but it's very effective.
Yeah. I mean, you really can't do much, right? I mean, Song Dong is top 10, right? Going against Chris Gutierrez, who's ranked 15th at the time, or 14th at the time. And in a big main event where a fight he wins, he can now get a top 5 opponent like Piotr Jan, and then start climbing the ranks. So why put yourself in a position to potentially get knocked out or anything of the sort could possibly happen, slip on a banana peel, and ruin your chances just to appease some fight fans. Some of the drunken fight fans, yes, they'll be boring for them, but at the end of the day, it's a dub in his win column, and then he gets to live another day and move up the rankings and fight for something more meaningful later on, and probably in 2024. Before we keep it moving, we have a question from Forrest Daniels. He's Makdessi. I have one question for you. What is the hardest fight you've ever had? You've been in some legendary fights.
Yeah, I get that question asked a lot. It's hard because I don't want to take away any of my fights. Every fight presents some type of difficulty. If it's physical, mental, like the preparation, But I guess the hardest fight, the toughest fight for me, was probably my third fight in the UFC when I fought obviously the guy was like Dennis Hallman. I don't know if you remember that fight. That was I should never have fought this guy. This guy, he looked he looked like he was on steroids. He felt so strong. The way when he grabbed onto me, no matter how much I could have wrestled every day in practice, I could have worked all my wrestling defense. I could have worked all the scenarios. The way he hold on, the way he was holding on to me in that fight, and he just like took me to the ground, and I felt like I was in the water drowning. I just wanted like to get out of there. It was a crazy experience. He was strong. The way he held it on to me, the way he was on full mount. I gave him my back, and he did a rear naked choke, and I was like seven, and I was like in my 20s, eight, like I was 8 or 9 fights in the professional, 9 fights, and this guy was like a legend. This guy had like over 100 fights in Pride. Then he got into UFC, and then he wore those speedos. And then Dana White kicked him out. But I would say the toughest fight probably that just because just because it's the toughest fight, just because how strong he was, how strong and how overwhelming I felt fighting this guy.
Let's talk about what fighters can and can't control in terms of the fight game inside and outside of the cage. And give us some insight on what you think fighters can control in terms of their destiny, maybe with the UFC or any other promotion, and what just kind of out of their realm of, what's going to happen is going to happen.
Yes, that's a good question. Yes, that's something that I had to learn throughout my fighting career is that what's in your control and what's out of your control. And there's a lot more out of your control than what's in your control, because let's just face it, what I mean? Like right now with the world, like now it's crazy with the war. Like we're pretty much I'm not trying to change topics, but like, there's a whole conspiracy going on TikTok with the World War III happening pretty soon. Like there's like so much things going on with the war and the technology, and like these are things that are out of our control. What's in my control being a mixed martial artist is my attitude, it's my perspective, perception, how I view, how I look at things. It's the way my energy, the way I carry myself. Focusing on my effort, focusing on day-to-day tasks. Being the best person of myself. These are things that are within my control. What the judges, the referee, Dana White, the UFC, my coaches, unfortunately, my fans, how much money I make or how much money I don't make, these are things that are out of my control. There's a lot of things are out of my control. Even my emotions, my thoughts. I practice in sports psychology. I got certified under Brian Kane. He was a high level sports psychologist. I worked with a sports psychologist for many years. He worked with Vitor Belfort. He worked with George St. Pierre. He worked with David Loazo. He worked with a lot of athletes, and that's one thing he taught me is what's in my control and what's out of my control.
Well, that's good because I mean, there's fighters going in. They don't know how to deal with some of the things that you have dealt with. It's not easy, right? You've talked about it on our last section of here, and how you took some fights that you probably wouldn't have taken, right? Just like your last fight, thinking things were going to go your way, whether you win or you lose, because that's what you were told, and then whatever you lost a very close split decision. I mean, a very close decision. I wasn't even split. A very close decision that could have gone your way. That many thought it should have gone your way, and then you got the axe regardless. So it's like those are the things where fighters going in have to know that. I mean, anything could happen. One day you could be on the roster, you can be rising, and then the next year they're like, no, we don't need you anymore. We got somebody else. That's why we have these. We just signed 66 contender series fighters over the last how many months ago. You know what I mean? So it's a hard business out there, and at least there is PFL that's kind of trying to be that number two. I don't know how well they are in acquiring fighters now that they brought in a brand new company in Bellator and bringing all their fighters in. And I know they're not UFC in terms of revenue. They only have so much money that they can divvy out, but they can only help grow the sport and hope that other fighters get the opportunity to make a living, a very livable wage. And that's another topic I wanted to kind of touch on here is, how does a UFC fighter or a pro MMA fighter stay afloat when, they're only fighting anywhere from 1 to 3 times a year and you're not making like this substantial amount of money. How does a fighter stay afloat throughout that time when they have to go through the training, the day-to-day stuff, and get ready for a fight and things of that nature? How does one stay afloat knowing that you're only making X amount, but you have to be training 24/7 to be great?
Mixed martial arts is entrepreneurship. You can't rely on just the fighting business. You have to try to be intelligent as a fighter, build a brand around you, and try to get sponsorship, get endorsements, try to figure out how to create multiple streams of income. That being said, Bellator and PFL, I believe the best fighters are in the UFC. I feel that the best fighters are in the UFC who are marketable and who are exciting. PFL and Bellator, they're just trying to monopolize. I don't see the fighters' quality is better in that organization. That's why for me it's hard because do you leave the UFC to go to fight in PFL because you can make more money? Yeah, I mean, yes, you know what I mean. So it's one of those things where it's like I rather get a pay cut. See, my thing is this: after fighting for so many years, after fighting for so many years, I was like, it was interesting because I was watching this video. Like if someone says to you, "Hey, I'm gonna pay you $1 million to fight," yeah, that sounds great, right? $1 million. But then once you get paid, right? What if you never fight again? What if you get injured? What if you spend this and then you got taxes and then you what are you gonna do with that $1 million? You have to buy, but you know what I mean? Like most of it is gonna be gone. But then it's like you have to keep making money. So I feel like they should have a pay cut. Fighters should. I'm okay with getting a pay cut, but getting royalties forever. As if I'm signed with an organization and I'm fighting for like X period amount of time, and then once I don't fight there no more, you know. But because you've been fighting for a certain amount of time, and they have a lot of, and they use your fight video footages. Every time they use your fight footages, you should get a monthly residual, because I feel like that would be ideal. Obviously, that's crazy talk, but that's just me thinking outside the box. Like that would be cool for the fighters to have something where it's like, they don't have to stress about looking for other ways of creating income. But yeah, I mean, I believe the UFC has the best fighters versus PFL, and I know, and now now that Bellator is gone, and and Bellator is with the US, with the all the Bellator signed with PFL. That's crazy. That's a lot of fighters. And then you have one championship who's dominating the Asian market. So you have Asia, you have one championship over there, and you got North America, you got the UFC, and you got PFL. But I mean, I don't really watch PFL, and I started watching PFL just because I was interested in the $1 million prize.
Yeah, that's mainly the reason why a lot of people would like to, change over to PFL because of that $1 million prize. So I mean, you're fighting what, 4 times? You have to pretty much go 4-0 in one calendar year to win $1 million. Is that something you would go along with, even though that you can't do any elbows? That's out of the equation. There's no elbowing, and but you have to fight 4 times in a year. Is that something that you would think about doing? Is that something that you think other fighters should kind of try to accomplish as well?
If I have to fight 3 times in a year to make $1 million, yeah, definitely I'll fight. But if you're asking me just to fight, obviously that's not intelligent, because you want. But here's the thing: 3 times in a year, that's ideally that's good, because periodically, you're giving your body 2 months of preparation, 1 month of recovery. That's good. 3 fights in 1 year, that's a healthy way of fighting. You're giving yourself enough time to recover. You're giving yourself enough time to progress in skills. You're developing your skills, and also you're peaking for your fight. So ideally that's perfect picture is fighting 3 times a year, obviously, and then with the UFC, a lot of things there's a lot of unknown variables, you know what I mean? So it's hard because they have so many fighters now that they're just kind of like playing the rolling the dice, you know what I mean? Whatever comes serve, like first come first serve type of thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and another thing with PFL is that it's not just winning your fights. You don't have to, but it's very emphasized on getting a finish in those 2-3 fights leading up to the playoffs, right? And even then, they could essentially just take you out, because they had an instance in where there was 2 fighters that were very close. They were like, I think they were brother-in-laws, or they were godson, whatever. Their godson was one of their whatever. Anyways, they're very close relatives, right? They fought each other, really didn't want to fight each other. It was a very lackluster performance. One of them won, and one of them essentially got into the playoffs. But then PFL comes back and says, well, you guys didn't fight to the level that we wanted you guys to fight. So now you're out, and we're putting Shane Burgos in your place. So I feel like it was very shady, because they wanted Burgos to be in there to begin with, because he was their shiny new signing, very exciting prospect for them. They really wanted to see him fight in the playoffs, and they used that instance to get him into the playoffs. That's the kind of like fishy thing when it comes to the PFL and the way they do that setup of the tournament. You know what I mean? So I don't know if it's right for everybody. And granted, not everybody gets the chance to fight in the tournament. Like they already said, Don Davis said that not everybody's gonna be able to fight in the PFL tournament. They're only gonna accept X amount of fighters, and the rest of them are gonna go and fight basically in Bellator. And all Bellator fights are saying majority of them are gonna be international. They're gonna be international fights for Bellator, which is kind of crazy because you have all those great champions. and you're gonna have Bellator fights over in international when theoretically they should probably be fighting in the States. I don't know. They're doing very things definitely different now that they brought in Bellator, and I'm not a big fan of the whole tournament thing because, like I said, the scoring system is crazy, and just the way that they did that with Burgos kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I'm not so big on that. Brandon was saying if you're a massive weight cutter, then the PFL is not for you because you have to make weight 4 times in a year, which is horrible for you. What are your thoughts on, the weight cutting, having to deal with that in a tournament style of fighting for a whole year?
Yeah, well, so weight cutting, it's just basically you got to be disciplined. You can't. A lot of fighters, what happens is they go into a strict diet, they do a lot of cardio, they do a lot of training, and then they get to that weight, and then they start bulking, they start eating a lot, their portions, and then become lazy. They take off, they get a little break. You know what I'm trying to say? So it's like, so obviously Bellator, when you're in PFL tournament, you can't do those things between fights. You have to stay disciplined. Maybe like have one cheat meal, but yeah, if you're a massive weight cutter, it's definitely going to be hard for you. You have to stay in that weight. You got to stay within those 10, 15 pounds of water weight. And also, I'm not a big fan of weight cutting. It's horrible to your body, So, and I do it the correct way. So imagine like those guys who are cutting from 100, 190 pounds, 200. Some guys cut up to from 200. I start cutting to 155 relatively from 170 pounds. So yeah, you obviously is definitely plays a big role with the weight cutting and having those many fights within the season. You gotta obviously stay disciplined, which I don't see a problem. Uh, I don't really follow PFL, but has there been any big problems with the weight cuts? I don't really know.
There have been some weight misses, but the way they do things when you miss weight, they basically are. I don't know if it's just in the playoffs. I think it's just in the playoffs. They deduct a point from you right off the bat. So you're coming in -1 on the scorecards, and you basically have to win all 3 rounds in order to get the unanimous decision, victory. Um, but I think during the regular season, they deduct you on the standings. So they give you like a -1 on the standings. So you pretty much you're gonna have to come in there and get a finish in your first 2 fights if you want to pretty much make it to the playoffs. And it's just weird. I'm not a big fan of like the tournament format. It's just off.
Yeah, I can see how it is. There's a lot to remember. It is complicated. It gets a little bit complex, but I'm interested to see who comes up with these rules.
Whoever created the PFL tournament from the get-go. I mean,
Is it?
it was worse in the beginning because they would have ties in their playoffs, and then they would
Is
have
it?
people fighting 3 times in one night, which is kind of absurd.
I'm just curious. I'm curious if it's like a group of guys or it's just one individual who's making all this decision making.
I feel like it has to be. I think the PFL has some type of board where it's the higher ups like Ray Seppo, Don Davis, and then you have some of the bigger name fighters that have probably given at least a little bit of their 2 cents. Brandon was saying that's why you see a lot of new signed fighters come over and go into the tournament above their normal weight class because they don't want to be brittle all year, which makes sense. You saw Impa Kasanganaai. He's not normally a light heavyweight. He gradually went up. He was a welterweight fighter in the UFC. Then he, unfortunately got released by the UFC. Then he fought in the regional scene as a middleweight. And then now he's a light heavyweight and absolutely ran through everybody in the PFL tournament to win $1 million after, that viral, knockout that, he had to deal with in the UFC. And now he's, the $1 million richer, and now he's looking to probably make it $2 million next year too. So it's kind of the good and the bad. You know what I mean?
That That's a crazy inspirational story, man. That guy, like, I actually did some research on him after the fact what happened, because that's crazy, man. You look, the guy went through the worst possible scenario, getting knocked out, getting released, and then fighting the PFL and winning the tournament. That's like a fucking that's a perfect example of what you can control and what you can't control, because one door closes and then another one opens.
Right. And that was, like you said, extremely inspirational because he was down. Like he was down on his luck and didn't know what was next for him. And he got into the right mindset, signed with the PFL, and it was just insane. Yeah, Ankle fought at 170 just for 2 fights, but I think he's a normal middleweight. I mean, he is kind of small for 205, but the dude's jacked. I mean, like he's absolutely beyond jacked, even at 205. And he even now called for a fight against Francis Ngannou. I mean, and more power to him. He's like, I can get up to 225 and fight him. I'll do it. I mean, that would be a mega fight in terms of the PFL, but who knows if that would really happen.
Since
But
we're
before,
speaking, since we're
yeah,
speaking, I don't want. Since we're speaking about PFL, what my thing is, whatever happened with Jake Paul, wasn't he supposed to be a part of it?
I think from what I heard, he'll make his debut probably towards the end of 2024 in their pay-per-view super fight series. Don't know who his opponent will be, but eventually he will be making his debut. Supposedly they gave him they were trying to get him and Nate Diaz, but Nate Diaz is like, I'm not fucking fighting in the PFL. He's like, I will never do that. Never. I don't care how much it's for, I'm not fighting in the PFL. I'm like, oh, because they were supposed to be throwing like $10 million at him to fight Jake Paul in the PFL, which is kind of crazy talk. But I don't know. I don't know who's gonna fight. Like I really don't know. Like you can't give him someone too skilled. I just can't fathom him being anybody that's too skilled, really. You know?
I thought he's gonna retire from fighting. That's why I was a little bit confused, because he starts talking about PFL and how it's gonna be the next big thing, and then he disappears. Then he does some boxing fights. And now he's talking about retiring from fighting and going into something else.
Yeah, and he was supposedly talking about he wants to now try to be like a tight end in the NFL, and that he just has some crazy dreams that he does. And he's actually fighting Friday night here in Orlando, fighting his first actual pro boxer too, and Andre August. That's going to be interesting to see. But let's kind of change up a little bit. I want to know about what's next for you. Is there anything on the horizon for John Makdessi?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I got bare knuckles reach out to me. I got Karate Combat League that reached out to me. Obviously I was like, hey, let me go into the PFL. Like once I saw. So here's the thing, like Oli Obang, he won the $2 million. He won the lightweight champion. Uh, I have a lot of respect for this guy. We train at the same gym. Like that's the crazy part. Like watching him becoming winning he like lost 4 fights or something in the UFC. He got cut, and then he gets into the PFL, and then he starts winning fights. It's just crazy to me because I beat the guy up in sparring sessions. You know what I mean? And I'm not. This is like a long time ago, so you can't really compare. Obviously he's a lot better now. He has more experience, but it's just watching him compete at the PFL, winning the title, winning the belts, making that much money. I was like, man, I wish I was in his shoes. Like that. That's obviously he made a lot of money within the PFL organization. So ultimately, I'm still like hoping that I get an opportunity. I'm trying to push PFL. So whoever's watching, all the viewers, like I'm trying to get PFL to sign me, and they're saying that they have a lot of fighters signed up. They're telling me that they don't have anything available for me right now, so I'm still waiting for some type of big organization to sign me up. So I'm still a free agent, training full time and kind of like just waiting. It's one of those things where like being a fighter, this is the hardest part about like fighting. It's like you don't know. You have to keep being ready. You got to be ready. You got to stay ready, and then wait for that call because it's like one of those things where I'm still kind of waiting to see which organization is willing to sign me up.
Have you thought about trying bare knuckle MMA?
Well, well, there's the MMA part of it.
Right. There's bare knuckle and there's bare knuckle MMA. Have you thought about trying bare knuckle, like game bred bare knuckle MMA? Have you thought about that?
I have, and Jason House. I work with Jason House. He's like one of he's a big name in the management business, and I trying to negotiate with see which one pays the most. So I'm still kind of waiting for that to flourish. But I did
Right.
thought about that, and I'm very interested in that because I do believe that I already have two hand surgeries, so I wouldn't do the whole bare knuckles thing. But the bare knuckles MMA with the gauze and the a little bit of protecting your hands, because it's crazy, man. I see those guys fighting, and I'm like with no protection, and I'm like, man, your hands like for sure you're gonna break your hands.
I I don't know that correct percentage, but it's gotta be high that a lot of them are breaking their hands during these matches, and they're still going forward. I mean, they're still throwing hands. I just don't know how they're doing it, but that I'm not a fighter. That's I leave that up to you guys.
Yeah, well, for sure, throwing punches the way it's a different type of punching. You can't punch the way you punch with when you're protected when your hands are you have hand wraps. Because when you have hand wraps and you have gloves on, you can throw certain strikes a certain way. Just like boxing. Boxers throw punches a certain way. MMA fighters throw punches a certain way. But when it's bare knuckles, you really have to be smart with. You have to really lock your wrist and your hand together. You have to have a strong. You have to make sure you're throwing the correct strike so you don't break your hand.
That's that's brutal to me. Like watching some of those fights, like we saw Eddie Alvarez and Mike Perry get into it for just like 1.5 rounds. It was just absolutely brutal of a sport, but those guys was thriving it. He said punches don't hurt as bad. Brandon's saying punches don't hurt as bad in bare knuckle MMA. Do you think that would be true?
Who's saying that?
Brandon. Because Brandon Jenkins also fought for game bred bare knuckle MMA. And he says punches don't hurt as bad in bare knuckle MMA.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. I never fought in bare knuckle, so I can't speak on my behalf. But that's pretty interesting. I mean, for that to, I thought it would have probably not that it would hurt. It's not a question of hurting. It's just a question of preserving your hands, like when you're throwing those type of punches. You know what I mean?
So you've broken your hand how many times with
So,
gloves on?
so here's the thing. Is he saying it doesn't hurt when you're receiving the punches, or is he saying when you're throwing the punches it doesn't hurt?
I don't know exactly what he said. I think he means receiving them. It doesn't hurt as much when you're receiving them. If they just cut more when you get punched in the face.
Yeah, that's interesting. I did not thought about that. I would have thought it would be the opposite. I thought it would be seemingly like, oh, that shit would not that it would hurt because here's the thing. It's like it actually makes sense because once you put gauze on, once you put leather gloves on, it makes the punch more harder.
Right.
Because the hand wraps, it kind of acts like a cast. Like once you wrap your hand up, you get that feeling of like protected, and it's like a cast. And now you go full pin, you throw those strikes 100%. But when it's not protected, yeah, it makes sense. You're not throwing as hard. You're more careful because you don't have any protection. So yeah, I understand his perspective. I understand why it wouldn't be as hard. But still, man, when you look at their faces, it's crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy. I'm surprised that they don't train head movements. Like, why is there? I'm not really familiar, but I'm surprised. Like they just eat the punches. They don't try to roll with the punches. They don't try to slip. They don't try to pull back. So, but
It's
it is
more
what
of
it is.
it's more a brawl than really like a technical fight, especially in bare knuckle BKFC because they have different scoring, right? I've I know someone personally who fought a great fight in BKFC, but they didn't, and he fought perfectly in terms of like how you would know a boxer would box, but that's not what they want to see. They want to see you two guys go at it, and it's all about the damage. But he was literally staying on the outside, throwing his jab, keeping the head moving, rolling with the punches, like you were saying. But it's like Brandon was saying, it's more volume punching. It's more about you coming forward and throwing. If you don't do that, that's not what they want. They don't want a guy that's just out there, just kind of like countering, rolling with the punches, like a Floyd Mayweather. You know what I mean? That type of thing. They don't want that. They want you to throw, be active, come forward, and throw some hands. So it's kind of hard. That's why I feel like you're not seeing as much of head movement and guys that are looking to outbox each other. They're going out there. They're looking to throw some hands, land some hands. That's
Yeah,
unfortunate. You know what I mean?
yeah. I wouldn't fight like that. That's not my style. I like to slip, roll, strike.
No, you're good. I just need to
Was
bring my
that?
phone. No, you're good. What were you saying?
No, I was saying like that wouldn't be my style. I wouldn't fight. For me, just to take shots and come forward. I would like to try to get angles. I will try to get some footwork. Get a I'm much more of I'm a counter striker. I'm a technical fighter, so I don't want to get hit because that's not. I don't get any pleasure of receiving the shot. I get pleasure in making the guy miss and hitting him.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, at the end of the day, you're really. I don't think you want all those cuts and bruises that you're going to be receiving just by getting hit with all those bare knuckles. You know.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah,
All right, let's keep it moving. Let's talk. Let's preview UFC 296. We're gonna go over just like the main card here because those are like the best like 5 fights on the fight card. The last fight card of the year, UFC 296. It's headlined for the welterweight championship. Leon Edwards taking on Colby Covington, who's been out for an entire year. He sat out for the year, pretty much waiting for his title shot because it's seemingly, it seemed like he was given the okay, you don't need a fight. We'll let you wait for the winner of Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman to commence after their second fight. If there was going to be a third fight, you probably would have had to wait until then. But here we are. They're up. Welterweight championship on the line. If you had what's your thoughts on this fight, and who do you think possibly come out as the welterweight champ?
yeah. I mean, that's 1 year off. You can play. I had those 1 year layoffs, not by choice, because of injuries, but 1 year off, it can actually be a good thing or a bad thing. Depending on how disciplined the guy is. Is he working on his skills throughout the whole year? Is he in the gym every day, training every day? Developing skills, or is he just like doing other things? So that's gonna be interesting. That's gonna play a major role. I'm a big fan of Edwards. Like I was actually watching his fights the other day, how he throws the punches and he kind of throws the head kick. Edwards, he's a cool cat. He is very, obviously, watching his fighting is. I feel like he has. I'll probably give him the edge for this fight.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with you there. I think he just has more momentum going. I think he's a bigger fighter. He's a longer fighter. His takedown defense has got substantially better. Being able to shrug off the takedowns that Usman was trying to throw his way was very impressive. But we also can't write out Colby Covington. He's got great cardio. He's got arguably the best cardio in the welterweight division. He can push a pace that's very hard to match. He's great at chain wrestling, and he throws a ton of volume. I think it's gonna be a great fight, but I think Leon goes out there and makes a statement. I think this is going to be his statement fight because everybody was still iffy about that second Usman fight, and he was losing up until the head kick in the first fight. I think this is going to be his statement fight, and he's looking to move up to 185. and challenge Strickland or Dricus Duplessis, whoever wins there, if he's victorious. I don't think he should do that yet because there's still a ton of guys he's not fought yet, like Bilal Muhammad, who's waiting in the wings, who's actually going to be the backup to the main event. He's going to be weighing in. What's your thoughts about Leon moving up if he were to be victorious versus staying where he's at and giving someone like Bilal Muhammad his shine and his chance at a title shot?
See, when somebody moves up weight, it's all about mentality. It's all about his mindset. For him, maybe he feels comfortable enough to move weight. Depending on how much weight he cuts, it depends on his training, his coaches, the people around him, how confident they feel that moving up a weight class is ideal. I'm not sure. Is he a big? Does he cut a lot of weight?
I don't know the exact amount, but I know he's not small for 170. I think he stands in at 6'2", in the welterweight division. So I think he's pretty lean, but he's pretty jacked too. I mean, I feel like he's probably cutting at least from 190 and 195. I would assume because he's pretty built. I mean, he's come a long way, right? He used to be more like the leaner type, but he's put on a lot of muscle mass over the years. And he looked pretty damn built when he fought Kamaru Usman. So I feel like he'd be healthy at 185. And when you look at Sean Strickland, right, he's not big for 185. He stands in at 6'1", 6'2", and he doesn't cut a ton of weight. He used to be a 170, and he's probably coming from like 200 pounds, maybe, I would assume. But then you look at guys like Paulo Costa or Dricus Duplessis and Robert Whitaker, things like guys like that. Those guys are kind of cutting a lot more weight. You know what I mean? I feel like he'll be on the smaller spectrum of the 185ers, but I don't think he'd be absolutely tiny either. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, that'll be interesting though. Him moving up weight class, that's a whole different ballgame. That'll be interesting to see how he performs at a bigger weight class.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the UFC will just be like, sure, why not? Let's try to do this double champ thing. But I feel like that's what everybody's really trying to do once you become champion. Not as early as Leon though, because Volkanovski didn't try to go to be double champ until he defended the belt like four times. But this is going to be Leon's only second title defense, and he's already talking about moving up to 185. So that's going to be interesting to see if the UFC will allow him to do that. Let's talk about the co-main event. We have the flyweight championship on tap. Alexandre Pantoja taking on Brandon Royval. How do you see this fight playing out?
Yeah, I'm not familiar in both of those people. I don't really. I have no idea how their styles of fighting. I'm not really familiar with them, so that's I have no idea. That's the crazy part about there's so many fighters that come in and go out. It's hard to keep track. But those two fighters, I never really watched them fight.
Man, you should go watch the Pantoja and Moreno fight when you get the chance. It was a fantastic fight there. When Pantoja won the belt, he looked phenomenal.
Which weight class is this? Is this bantamweight?
Men's flyweight division.
Oh, flyweight. Yeah, that's why I don't watch it. Who the hell watches?
Oh man, the flyweights are fun, man. You gotta get into them. There's some really good fighters. They're very exciting fighters, especially the last fight we saw with Tim Elliott taking on Sumo Darju this last weekend at UFC Vegas 83. That was a fantastic fight between those two flyweights. And Tim Elliott, he won on just a few days' notice, and he won in the first round. I thought that was a great fight. I mean, they're very exciting because they're very fast and very technical fighters too, especially these two guys. Pantoja is a high-level jiu-jitsu black belt, trains down here at American Top Team. He actually beat Royval 3 or 4 fights ago, submitted him in the second round, via rear naked choke, which is just like his go-to. But Brandon Royval looked good in that first round. He was beating him up, landing really good strikes. I actually think he won that first round. But then he overextended because he's tall and long. He overextended, and then he got his back taken, and then that was all she wrote after that. I think it's going to be a fantastic fight between two high-level scramblers, high-level fighters. I'm looking forward to this. I think I'm looking forward to this more than the main event, honestly, because me personally, I'm a big fan of the flyweight division. I was very upset when they were trying to get rid of it, and I'm glad that they kept it around because I knew these guys are very high level, and they're very fun to watch. I'm telling you, watch that Moreno and Vitoja fight, the last one for the belt. Great fight. But yeah, let's look at we have. Shavkat Rakhmonov taking on Stephen Thompson. Shavkat's looking like the real deal. He's trying to get in there, get a title shot. He's another guy that's surging up the rankings, while Thompson is trying to get in there and show that he still has it and he still should be considered one of the best, and hopefully trying to go and fight for the title one last time. How do you see that fight playing out?
Yeah, that's gonna be an interesting fight, just because I know Wonder Boy personally, and we trained together back in the few years back at TriStar. He came to TriStar with his father. Also, Wonder Boy Thompson. It was a karate background, so I know him. I knew him in the karate community. So that's an interesting fight. Obviously, Wonder Boy is someone that I know personally, so I'm always gonna try to favor a friend of mine. He's a good person, but he's fighting a dangerous guy. He's the guy he's fighting is like, obviously, you watch his last fight. It's like I feel like those are the new up and comers, like the hybrid fighters who don't have any background, and they kind of just come into and they just kind of started mixed martial arts. Because when you have a background, when you come from a traditional background like myself or like Wonder Boy, you kind of stick to that style sometimes. Even though he's learning everything else, but it's gonna be interesting. My only thing is I see if Wonder Boy keeps it from the outside, if he fights it from the outside, but if he closes the distance, uh, it's going to be interesting with the wrestling and the grappling part, because that's ultimately, if he gets into the boxing, the dirty boxing with the clinching, because he blends it very well. The way he blends in his boxing and his submissions.
Yeah, that's gonna be. Shavkat's been. He's been, like I said, he's been looking like the real deal. What he did to Neil was very impressive. The way he submitted him.
Yes.
Um, and now going against Wonder Boy, I mean, it's hard to deny him a number one contender fight next if he gets through Wonder Boy. But the thing is, I don't know. Like, I don't know what's going to happen if Leon wins. Is he moving up? It's just the welterweight division is just thrown in the air at this point. Because like I said, we have Bilal Mahal, who's weighing in as the backup for the title fight, which normally they would say that's like the next person up to fight for the title. But that's not always the case. They could just throw a wrench in this and have Bilal face off against Shavkat if Shavkat wins the fight. And then Leon goes to 185, fights there, wins or loses. Then he comes back down to defend his title. It's just completely up in the air to what's going to happen in this division. It's completely wide open. But this fight's gonna be a great fight, honestly. And I want to see how Shavkat's gonna be able to deal with the range of Wonder Boy. Right, we know that Shavkat's gonna need to get this to the ground, but I want to know how he's gonna deal with the kicks, the range, the distance, and all of that, and the movement, and not get countered as he's trying to come in and close the distance. So I'm very excited to see where both of them are at, right? Because Wonder Boy is definitely getting up there in age, but I still think he's one of the best at 170 pounds, and he's not somebody that should be taken lightly by anybody, even as someone as good as Shavkat Rakhmonov too. So we'll see what happens there, and then we have what else on the main card? Oh, we got Tony Ferguson. I think he's on like a 6 or 7 fight losing streak, coming in to take on Paddy Pimblett. I don't know what to think about this fight, man. I mean, we know that the UFC wants to build on Paddy, and his likeness, and kind of build him up the right way. Is this the right way to build up Paddy to give him somewhat of a credible win after a very controversial win against Jared Gordon in his last fight?
Yeah, well, first of all, before we get into the fight itself, who the hell, like, doesn't make any sense to me what's happening with Tony? Is it just me, or I feel like this guy's crying out for help? Like, I mean, I feel bad for the guy.
He's
I
training
hear
with Tony Goggins now. Apparently, like he's not like he's
it's
not a
not,
coach.
I just don't understand. Like, I watch what he puts out there on social media, but I also heard like his characteristics. I heard his in his personal life, he's not all there. Like, mentally, he's not all there. And I don't know personally. I don't know him personally, but and also six. What's his? He's on a how much losing streak?
Well, if you want, I'm thinking it's like at least 5 or 6. No, it's 6. 6 fight losing streak.
But think about that. Anybody else would have been cut a long time ago.
That's true.
Think about it. 6 losses in the UFC. That's crazy.
And now they're trying to build, you know,
Well,
off a win streak, you know.
regardless of what they're trying to build, obviously, like, it doesn't take it doesn't take a scientist to figure it out. Tony's been around the game for a long time. He has 6 losses. Obviously, he took a lot of damage. He fought high level guys.
Yeah.
And then you got that fucking guy, Pimblett, Patty. I call him Patty Cake. He has a big name. He's from London. Talks, has a big. He's a hype, younger kid. Obviously he's an uppercomer, but it can work both ways. I personally, I'm always gonna go for the underdog. I hope to God Tony wins, just because I don't really see Patty Pimblett, and he's like a high level fighter. I really don't see I don't see him after him fighting Gordon. I don't really see him how he's gonna be the top 10 guys.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think there's a lot of holes in his game. Do I think he's a terrible fighter? No. But do I think he's at the upper echelon? I don't think he's there yet. I think he still has some holes in his game. And granted, he's lost some fights on the regional scene, and fights I think got beaten up pretty bad. I just feel like he's had a lot of favorable matchups, even though I feel like he lost his last fight, which I'm pretty sure 99.9% of the people out there believe he did too. But that's neither here nor there. And the last fight I want to talk about is the fight between Vicente Luque and Ian Gary. This is a very interesting fight because there's been a lot of things revolving around Ian Gary coming to this fight. Between
about his girl,
about him supposedly knocking people out in the gym, and then him also getting knocked out in the gym, and him. I don't know if he left Kill Cliff FC or not, because now he's facing off against Vicente Luque. And I know Luque is not going to have Henry Hooft in his corner. There's a lot of drama surrounding this fight. So I want to get your take on this matchup.
Yeah, I don't like that guy, Ian. Just because his personality and just the way he disrespected the guy his last fight. His persona, and I'm a martial artist. Like, there's no reason for you to be like. You can tell he's very cocky. He has this ignorant. He has very arrogant type of guy. He looks like a bully. He looks like a type of guy. He went to school and he would bully people around. And me personally, guys like that, I can't stand. These are the type of guys where I wanna see him lose, just because he needs to get humbled. He's very. I don't know what made him so famous, to be honest. I don't know how he got so popular, but he got so big. I see him doing with Conor McGregor. Those footages of him sparring with Conor, and then with that girl that he's with, and just all this crazy shit. Social media is such a web.
It is.
But style, the way he fights. But think about it. The way he fights, he's very tall, very long. But he's not really he's not anything spectacular to watch. He's not someone oh wow, I can't. I'm trying to say, he's not somebody that I would want to watch him. He's not like an Anderson Silva. He doesn't have that aura around him. I was a big fan of Anderson Silva. Why? Because he would literally drop his hands in front of you, make you miss. He was like the Matrix. He was dodging, he was slipping, moving. what he did to Forrest Griffin, like stuff like these are the types of fights you want to watch, like crazy, like head movement, good counters, good defense, like just like something like spectacular, something like spinning back fist knockout.
Yeah, no, good stuff. No, of course. And with the crazy part is he's, I think, the biggest favorite on the card, which is kind
Uh,
of crazy to me, considering he's going against someone who's as skillful and as dangerous as Vicente Luque. I know Luque, he didn't look the best against RDA, and he had some losses before that, but he's still Vicente Luque. He's still a very dangerous fighter. How do you see the fight playing out? Like, does Luque have a chance being one of the biggest underdogs on the card, or do you think Gary goes in there and knocks him out like he's done majority of his other opponents?
yeah, well, that's the beautiful thing about fighting. It's unpredictable. It's, you know what I mean, and anyone has that chance. Like that's the thing. It's 1-on-1. But you have to also understand, like I was saying before, previously, like what is his training camp? How was his preparation mentally? Where is he at? Is he,
Mentally,
like
mentally.
people don't see people watch the physical part, but you don't see what's going on into the fighter's head, like reaching to the fight, like the mental, the mental aspect of the game, like that's the hardest part because you don't know where his mindset is at. You don't know if he's in a good place in his personal life. Sometimes people, some fighters you see, like if they're not happy in their personal life, it reflects on the performance. So I don't really know what's going on with that guy. I don't know where is his training, what's his coaches. You have to gotta look at who's his trainers, who's in his corner. Like, is he training with like high level guys? Like who are what's the credentials? Like you gotta look at all these things when you're watching a fight. You're not just looking at two individuals. You're also looking at who helped them prepare for those fights.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I know he was training for the most part Kill Cliff, but I don't think Henry Hoops could be in his corner. I know he moves around to different gyms to get in, work with different fighters a lot. I don't even think he was training in the U.S. For this fight. I think he moved out of the U.S. because of all the drama that's been going on, with him and his wife, and so he kind of wanted to lay low outside of the U.S. And I don't know where he's training out there, but it's going to be an interesting fight. I personally, if I was betting on this fight, I definitely would not be taking Gary at his price. And I know Luque is definitely not where he used to be. I think that Neil fight is really what changed things, and it technically did because I believe his brain was bleeding after that fight. He had to go through a ton of neurological type of things to kind of get right before he can get back into fighting. Um, but maybe he's fully healthy, ready to go, and maybe he's the best Luque we'll see. And I'll see how that happens. But I would not bet on either one of these two in this fight. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to UFC 296 in general. It's the last fight card. Then we have 3-4 weeks off, which is the worst part of being a fight fan is the end of the year because there's no fights. There's not even boxing. The best boxing match just happened last weekend, and that's pretty much the end all for 2023. And now we have UFC 296, and I wouldn't call the Jake Paul fight a big fight, but it is a fight that people are going to tune into on Friday night. And that's it. And that's it for a month. And it's just it's gonna be rough for us. Let's put it that way. But before we end this episode, our first ever episode of the Dark Side of MMA, I want you to shout out, your merch and where people can follow you, and for more behind the scenes look into the life of a fighter.
Yeah, so obviously, besides my fighting career, I have Bulwer_TM on Instagram, Facebook. You guys can follow. If you guys, support, they have good quality. I'm wearing one right now. It represents determination, perseverance. It represents all the stuff that a fighter goes through. Also I have my own website. You guys can go check it out, johnmakdessi.com. I also started. I have a training packages where I sell out help people, mentor people. So that's something that I started too. So yeah,
I like
man,
it.
any
I
support.
like it. I appreciate it, man. Yeah, this is fun. We'll be back at it next week, same time. We're gonna do this every week for you guys. Same time, same place. Go like this and follow us on all socials, and we'll see you guys next week. Adios.